Star Trek 57, M23, take 2.
Star Trek Podcast.
Welcome in peace to the Enterprise, Damon Bach.
It is our pleasure, Captain Picard. Might I introduce my first officer, Kazaga, my second, Rata.
This is my first officer, Commander William Riker. Second in command, Data. Counselor Troy.
We have heard that you use females. Clothed females. Most interesting.
They are that, sir.
And the android was mentioned too. What is its price? We should like to purchase it.
He is not for sale. Commander Data is
second-hand merchandise, and you wouldn't want him.
Second-hand, sir? Oh, of course. A human joke.
What do you think is a good way to start the podcast today?
Hi, guys. It's
Hello.
time to talk about Star Trek The Next Generation.
This is the It's Got Star Trek.
Hi, guys.
Hi,
guys.
Hi, guys.
Hi. We're talking about Star Trek today.
My name's Dan.
My name's Jesse.
All right.
You guys have to quit fooling around.
Fooling around.
What are you talking about?
All right, audience members, what you got to do is you got to take Dan and Jesse and switch them. Because they were
Switch 'em.
lying about their voices. Because Jesse said his name was Dan and Dan said his
My
name was
name
Jesse.
is Dan.
All right.
So what does that make
This
Patrick?
is what I sound like. when I'm not on the
All right,
podcast.
this is a very inauspicious start to our very popular and successful podcast.
I started my
It's
notes
embarrassment.
We're in the top 25%.
Something like that.
I started my notes in the Ariel, and then I went to
In the Ariel,
Then I went to
the Courier.
Courier News Lame. I ended up on Consolas.
Okay. Is this
Console
Dan's
us.
all about fonts now? Is that your whole new thing?
That's my new thing is fonts.
Oh, that's what you were doing.
All right.
Do they?
Okay.
Don't they? Whatever. They don't have the terminal font though. I want the terminal font
Terminal font's pretty great.
because that's what it looks like in Notepad plus.
Star Trek fonts are pretty great. I like downloading the Star Trek fonts.
Like Klingon and shit?
Notepad plus.
Well, you got
plus,
Klingon, but
Notepad.
you got your
Notepad
your
plus
TOS
plus.
style TOS.
It doesn't. It does a dark theme, not like the Windows, but
You've
like
got,
a terminal.
the movie style Star Trek font, and there's a couple others that they're tossed in there.
Like when you see the word
There's
Star
like
Trek.
there's like the TNG style. You know, anyway. Yes, Dan's
That
going on
sounds
about
cool, man.
Notepad plus plus, which I was making fun of last week, and then like a bunch of people on the internet were like, "Dan's right. Notepad
I think
plus
there were
plus
like.
is right."
I think there were like two
know.
people on the internet said that.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. It is.
I know.
But they
Notepad plus
probably,
plus is
they probably
better.
know what they're talking about.
We were just kind of fooling around, you know. It was just fooling around for entertainment purposes. I just wanted to state that I'm not a fool.
I'm not a fool.
Yeah. Granted, I
I'm no
usually just
fool.
use Google Docs these days. Yeah. What are you gonna do?
I actually don't really know
I'm actually-
what any of this means.
I'm trying Google Docs.
Yeah, this is outside
That's
of
how much of a fool I am.
this is very much outside of Jesse's ken,
Well,
as they
Absolutely.
say.
I'm.
It is not in his
My
bailiwick.
bailiwick, for real.
I'm doing Google Docs right now.
Okay, that's fine.
So I'm very fancy.
Don't Google Docs me.
Okay, so welcome to the It's Got Star Trek podcast. The tomfoolery segment has concluded,
That's it.
and we are now going to, in earnest, I tell you,
earnest.
mark my words, in earnest, discuss Star Trek: The Next Generation, The Battle, episode 9 of season 1. So Star Trek: The Next Generation, season 1, episode 9, originally aired November 16th, 1987.
Yeah.
So quite some time ago.
Yeah, it's a really old joke.
For context, I was a child, a small child.
Still are a child.
I act like a child, but I was
I
physically
was a slightly larger child.
physically inhabiting the body of a young child.
So the season 1 had all the synth music. Now, do you think the same guy who wrote the synth? I wonder how many people they had write the music, because it's saying that Ron Jones did the music for this episode, And then I
Ron
looked at-
Jones. That sounds like a fake name.
Like the episode
and then-
music, or but not the
it just
the title music.
It just says no. It's the episode music because now I'm looking at one from the next phase, which is from what, season 5, I think. That says music by Dennis McCarthy.
Yeah,
so,
Dennis McCarthy did most of the music.
Okay, so that's my question was: do you think the synth music was different from when it was the composer was different for the synth music versus the orchestrated music? And it seems like it might be.
I don't have an answer to your question.
And it seems like it might be.
I think it was more different. The synth versus orchestrated was dependent on the season.
And you are okay. First of all, yes, that's correct.
But were they written by different people, though?
Dan, I think your conclusion has merit and is probable, but I can't say with certainty without doing additional research. However, Jesse, you're correct that TNG used all synth action in seasons 1 and 2. And when the show became particularly successful, I think they decided they can toss them a few bones and become fully orchestrated in season 3.
But they also had, season 3 had extra, and I think I've totally mentioned this in several episodes before, they had extra synth noises that were new to season 3.
Yes.
Where things were just kind of shimmering.
Okay.
Well, because the 80s were marching along.
Yeah, yeah. It was-
Technology
it
was
the end of the
rapidly
80s.
progressing.
So Code of Honor, which was episode
One of the more terrible,
Oh, yeah.
poorly
yeah,
aged
yeah.
episodes. Actually, not even poorly
Co-
aged. It was stupid when it came out.
Code
I
of
think so,
Code
yeah.
of Honor had Fred Steiner. So I guess
for
they
the
had
music.
Yeah, so I guess they had different people.
Was
is
Fred
episode
Steiner's
3.
synth music as jingly and jangly?
They always-
because it was always synth, but this was a particularly jingly and jangly episode in my book.
And they always have
By the way, as a reminder to the audience, we are speaking about Star Trek: The Next Generation, season 1, episode 9, The Battle.
And they always have that, like, and this episode had it, but they always have that little ding noise, that creepy ding that's
Yes.
like ding 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 when something like mysterious is happening.
I know what you're saying. Your little recreation just
It
sounded like one of those old grandfather clocks.
Like, doon doon doon.
You always had
doon.
that friend's house that had
Right.
the grandfather's clock, and
Right.
it was disturbing because it would be all like.
Yeah, I did sound like that. I don't know how to do it, but it was like it had that creepy high pitched bell tune that would play when something mysterious was going on.
You could have had
Yeah.
the
There was
sound
like-
effect.
There was like a bed of like synth violin, synth strings, and then over the top it had that ding ding ding.
Yeah.
But it would like ding 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 ding
Ding dong.
ding dong ding dong, guys.
Yes.
Ron Jones,
Okay.
Dennis
so-
McCarthy.
Yes. Okay.
Dennis McCarthy.
Yes, he did the music later on.
But no, check it
Did
out.
he also do Deep Space Nine?
No, check it out. The Last Outpost.
Yes.
he did.
Dennis McCarthy did The Last Outpost.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
So he was early. He did a previous Ferengi, the earlier
Right.
original Ferengi episode, The Last Outpost. And this is a Ferengi episode, by the way. We're
So-
presuming you've watched The Battle.
The Battle.
Otherwise, why would you be
The
listening to
Battle.
this? But in case you haven't, it is the second of the first season Ferengi episodes.
So regardless of, and I guess that was episode 5 or 4 or 5, I don't know however they want to number it, but I guess it doesn't matter whether they're doing synth or orchestral. Dennis McCarthy was involved in both ways. So he was the mainstay, but then they had a few other people spattered throughout. Now the question is did they have anyone composing other than Dennis McCarthy for the orchestral ones in seasons 3 on? That was season 3 on, right?
I think so.
Season 3 on, yeah.
That's the next question, but we'll wait till next week because this is far too interesting to blow up all at once, right?
All right. Now what we're going to do for the rest of the podcast is we're going to see how well Dan is able to refrain from looking up that information that he so desperately wants to know. But we are already recording the podcast,
Wow.
and
I have self-control.
reading Wikipedia live on a podcast can provide
I was doing IMDb.
some degree of entertainment.
IMDb.
Yeah, I was using Wikipedia as the generic, like Xerox or Kleenex. You know what I'm saying?
That's weird.
Okay.
It's a weird way of putting it.
I mean, I think it's a really clear way of putting it.
I think it's weird.
I think the audience now fully 100% understands my analogy, even if they may not have it initially,
If Wikipedia had a list of all the composers for Star Trek,
which I'm sure they do. There's probably a list called Star Trek composers. But you shouldn't look it up now because you want to save it to next week's episode, right?
But I'll forget by then.
But no, if
Write
it's
yourself a
important,
note, dude.
you know that old saying, if it's an important enough thing to remember, you'll remember it.
If that's an important enough thing to remember it,
if you must
you'll
remember,
remember
You
it. That's
remember that
old
saying?
old saying that they say. It rolls off the tongue.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you remember stuff, you got to remember it.
Now,
and if
this-
you got to remember it, you're going to remember it.
Whoa.
We had, in fact, mentioned that we were going to be speaking in earnest. And I think thus far we have been, but I fear we
You
are
made a
treading...
little weird fart noise when you were saying it. You were like,
I fear Southern Succotash.
I keep thinking about Ernest P. Worrell from like Ernest
Why do you
Saves.
keep... He's dead.
That guy is tight.
Jim Varney.
Yeah,
you kept
Jim
saying
Varney's
in
dead.
earnest, and
In
so
earnest.
it's reminding me of Jim Varney.
In earnest. Yeah.
Remember Ernest Goes to Camp?
Or Ernest Goes to Jail. That's another one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Ernest Saves Christmas. Right, yeah.
All right, we've listed the filmography.
He
And
goes.
some other weird
he goes-
ones
he's
after
in that.
that.
He's in Santa's sleigh, and he's heading straight perpendicular towards Earth, and then he stops right before he hits the ground. He looks at the screen and goes, "Air brakes."
Wasn't he a local fella to the Mid-Atlantic area?
Am I allowed to look that up?
That's a totally new topic, so you can look that up while we're.
I thought he
continuing.
was from Florida.
Okay, so now my warning about not getting off of topic and continuing to speak
we
in
went
earnest
way off topic.
has thrown us off topic. So
This
we
time
apologize.
it was good.
If you're a new listener to the podcast, this is absolutely not normal.
He's buried in Lexington Cemetery.
Normally our
Lexington
podcasts are
where?
really well
I don't
organized
know.
and everything moves along very smoothly and it's very clear. All right? Good. So we'll continue this podcast. Point number 1, which we sort of alluded to already. This is the second of the first season Ferengi episodes. And for background, for those who may not be aware, these Ferengi in season 1 were intended to be a vicious, horrible, evil enemy, a new serious threat for the Federation. And it didn't work because it came off as really silly, especially in the last outpost, which we haven't discussed before, but that's
They're
first
more
episode.
like monstery. Like later on, the Ferengi get developed into these sort of more,
lovable doofuses.
Right. So when they get transported onto the bridge, like
With
first
their
of,
80s style transporter,
Yeah.
zap,
yeah, and,
swirly zaps.
and first of all, they looked confused by the transporter.
Oh.
They're like, oh, but like they also reminded me of that. Dave Chappelle did that sketch, and he was talking about how Charlie Murphy before the sketch would be all like normal, and then they'd say like, okay, get ready for your part, and then suddenly he'd go from sitting still to being all like swarthy and like. That's what the Ferengi. We saw that process from the Ferengi when they got transported over, because they transported over, and it was almost like the director was like, okay, now start acting all squirrely and snivelly,
100%.
and they were still, and then they're like they were doing this snivelly thing. The same thing happened later actually with Picard when he was on that weird chair in the Stargazer, when they showed the picture of him straight forward, and it looked like they were like, okay, 3, 2, 1, and then he like ripped off the arms and went like, no, stop, we will shoot you. Anyways, that's getting ahead of ourselves, but those were two scenes where it looked like they started the camera and they said, okay, now do the thing, like right after they were already filming
like
them.
a couple of them are like just kind of like gyrating.
Yeah.
Well,
like they're doing funny stuff with like their weird, they're extra weird Ferengi teeth and like their tongues
and you need the teeth. Armin Shimmerman has discussed this, how you can't really do the voice without the teeth, because he recently did.
but their teeth became less gross.
Yes, but they were still goofy. I'm sure they were.
Yeah,
I'm sure his teeth, Armin Shimmerman's teeth, were better. But he did the voice recently on Lower Decks, and so he mentioned having to put the teeth in order to get the voice right.
I bet when he took those teeth out, it was like all this saliva and spit just came like stringing down, like flowing off like a cup.
I mean, I'm not going to say you're wrong. You won't hear that from me.
You won't hear it from me. That Kazago, the number one, the first officer Kazago,
He's your number one first officer.
He's my number one ghost officer.
Did you say ghost officer?
I don't know what I was saying. He's my number one dad.
He's my number one Damon.
He's my number Damon.
Number Damon?
He's my number one Damon.
That was scary. That was almost...
Well, you know, my name is Simon, and I like to do drawings.
Yes.
So First Officer Kazago, he actually starts seeming more like not all weird
Yes.
and lizard like.
Yeah.
Like they seemed all animal and reptilian like in their vibe. They just seemed like we're all gooply, we're gooply,
We're so gooply.
and then like, but as the episode went on, he like started to seem like a normal actual character. You know?
I was going to say that
A reasonable fellow.
I think what's cool about this is the Ferengi were a failure as a new galaxy-threatening enemy, right? Gene Roddenberry was in charge at this time. He made Worf an officer on the Enterprise.
The Klingons weren't a threat anymore.
Well, not only were the Klingons friends, the implication in the first season is basically that the Klingons are part of the Federation. I mean, I don't think they stated outright, maybe, but it feels like that's the deal, you know, before they clarify that later.
Right. Yeah.
But Roddenberry was all about minimizing references to TOS. Like there was not a Vulcan on the bridge and that sort of thing, right? So he wanted a new enemy. And on paper, the idea of the hyper-capitalist evil people as the enemy of the peaceful Communist Federation makes sense. It's just that it was not very well executed in the design and the implementation of it. But that all being said, even though they didn't end up being the big galaxy-spanning evil, their characterizations are not that far off from what they evolved in later, right? Which is what I think you were getting at, Dan, where yes, it's a little bit more like humans, you know, sniveling and like they're less later.
They said human.
Yes.
They did say human deliberately.
You were asking about that last week, last episode.
Right. So Quark last week said human.
Quark!
He said human.
Quark.
This week they said human, but they both said it like very deliberately separating the hue from the man. Zumanity.
You still see that the
Isn't that a
Klingon,
Cirque du Soleil.
the
thing?
Ferengi.
I don't know.
are,
I'm not that cultured.
They're only interested in what's going to be profitable, and the fact that this guy was doing some crazy shit that was not profitable.
Yeah.
The other two Ferengi guys were clearly like shocked and dismayed like they're just like, wait a minute, what's going on with this guy? And eventually they're just like, okay, this guy has to be taken out because
It was interesting.
he's being very un-Ferengi.
Yes,
like,
and the fact that Damon Bach was being un-Ferengi was itself an evolution of the characters, right? So even though this is only the second time we're seeing them, and they are largely stereotypical and one-dimensional, there are two things that happen in this episode: Damon Bach seeking revenge, and his first officer sort of, you know, being cool and smart about things. Those are both showing some of the diversity of thinking and thoughts in Ferengi land, which is made, you know, they do that much better later on, particularly on Deep Space Nine, right? Where they flesh them out super and show there's lots of different ways Ferengi think about things.
I'm trying to find what that one Ferengi said in particular when he was like,
I'm all ears.
when they said there was no price, that one Ferengi was basically like for shame.
Like, no price? Oh, he was like the shame.
Or something.
Or no, he said, what did he say?
What did he say?
You guys are both
ugly, very ugly.
Oh, what is that? Okay.
Jesse's looking up at the sky.
Oh, yeah. At no cost. Oh, ugly. Very ugly.
Yeah.
That was Rata. Good call.
Yeah.
Jesse
and
pulled it out.
They were just like, what's going on here? Like,
what's
this
going
is bad.
on?
They were like, but they were basically like, oh, shame on you.
Yeah.
You motherfucker.
You're giving him a starship?
Yeah. So he which is weird because there was sort of like a profit from it. There was a profit for the captain in the sense that he got revenge, but that's not the kind of profit.
That's not what they're into.
That's not the kind of profit they're into.
They want money.
So yeah, in the end, profit is all about personal gain, right? But I guess it's very specific rules. It has to be about like, you know,
it's in the
things.
Rules of acquisition.
Like you can't profit. Like it doesn't count to profit off vengeance. I guess it
probably not. Yeah.
I don't know.
It's interesting.
I mean, unless it turns out that it is profitable.
It definitely wasn't profitable.
Usually is not going to be.
Well, in the context of like a pirate ship, and I'm not suggesting that this is how Ferengi ships run, but you know, if you can't share your profit, right, that revenge is very personal.
Yeah.
So maybe there's some expectation that whatever endeavors they use, you know, that some of that's going to trickle down to the crew.
They develop the Ferengi later on, and you don't see them as like this military power. This is presented more early, you know, with the TNG early on. They're presented more as like this sort of.
They've got big ships.
This is like the Ferengi military.
Yeah.
And later on, we see like, you know, just the the Ferengi are just these guys that they're not very militaristic. They're just capitalists,
Or at least that's the ones we see.
yeah.
the
We
thing
see
with-
like the Grand Nagas, but we don't.
Yeah, with the Ferengi, it's always been they don't develop as much stuff as they buy it, right? So they buy like warp power, warp field, warp drive. They buy huge weapons. They buy technology to make big, giant, scary ships that are actually formidable. Because at least, like you said, early on, the ships were definitely you didn't want to have to get in a fight with the Ferengi ship. It was like a fucked up thing to have to deal with.
That they're so into profit that like Riker seemed like he gave them a pass. Like at the end when Kazago was saying like, we're gonna leave you be. Like, there's no profit in this venture.
Yeah.
We're gonna leave you be. Good luck. And Riker was almost touched by that. But it's like that's how into profit they are. That like the fact that they just kind of like. It doesn't help us to fuck with you now.
Yes.
That's kind of like their version of saying like, we're on your side.
Yeah.
Like you can't expect us to actually help you because that would be unprofitable. But like, yeah, I don't know. It seemed like there was kind of a dick move. Like our captain fucked your shit up, and now we're just going to leave you
Now we're just
behind.
gonna leave.
Now we're just going to.
This is just a Federation matter. It's like
Yeah, right.
you and Captain Picard are going at it.
Yeah, right. It's like I thought that you should know. We put him away.
But
It's
you
like,
said put him.
we put him.
Yeah, a little put him.
I mean, I guess it was helpful in the sense that now they knew that guy wasn't coming after him anymore. But still, I don't know. It was a whole.
How about why don't we start at the beginning? So we in the teaser, or wait, what do you call it, Dan? You like to call them the opening?
I call it
business?
the cold opening, but
Cold open.
but it's also I've seen it called as a teaser, like in Memory
Teaser, cold
Alpha.
open.
Memory Alpha calls it teaser. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not a cold open, but like that's what I call
think
it.
cold open works, teaser works, regardless.
Regardless.
Same difference.
We open up. Picard is all jibber jabbering on about how they're in the Zindi Sabu star system, but it's actually Zendi. It sounded like Zindi, as in Star Trek Enterprise Zindi, but
right.
it's Zendi. According to things, it's the Zendi.
The Zendi. Oh yeah, because I looked up Zindi. Zindi is
Sabu,
different.
but Zendi Sabu star system. And immediately when Picard is talking, you get a really classic, funny first season line reading where all these actors are still getting into their character and they're not quite there yet. And Patrick Stewart's all like 3 days. three. There's a few things like that in this episode where people say things in a hilarious way. In fact, I think it's usually Patrick Stewart.
I have 3 days ago. They've so far responded with only a message: "Stand by, Enterprise." Oh yeah, the Zendi Sabu. He did a really awkward when Crusher walked into his. Now, what room was that? What room was that she walked into? Was that his bridge ready room, or was that some kind of other room?
It seems like it
didn't look like his
not
bridge
his ready room.
No, it's not.
It's like maybe his bedroom ready room or something.
It's like his Oh yeah, that's right. It
His
was
study in his
It was
room.
his bedroom because she drugged him without his permission
Yes,
and like sent
yeah.
him to bed.
Yeah.
Right, you're right. It was his bedroom. But when she first came into the room, he's like,
hanging out at his desk,
yeah, he
looking
like
at stuff.
and he's like very deliberately sort of like gestured for her like a robot or something. He was
Yeah.
like, "Yes, have a seat" or whatever, and he made his hand like made this giant
How many
weird
desks
slow
does that
awkward
guy have on the ship?
this
He's got
awkward-
a desk in his room. He's got a desk in his other room. He's got that big table in the conference room. Like,
He made a big long
That's
awkward,
two desks and a table.
He
Jesse.
made
got 2 desks and a table.
He made a long awkward
Come on.
He made a long awkward gesture. Okay.
Yeah,
now I'm
okay.
done.
All right, you
How
got it.
many desks do they have? I don't know how many desks.
2
they have.
desks and a table,
Okay. 2 turntables and a microphone.
pretty much.
He goes, "Yes, doctor, sit down." And he makes his arm go whoosh.
I love the fact that they have this whole thing about how headaches are stupid.
yeah,
it's
what's the deal with
It's
that?
crazy that Picard has a headache.
It's like, yeah, I've heard
She's like,
of him.
what? She's
but
like, what the fuck? You fucking kidding
we've
me, man?
evolved beyond that.
And it's weird that he's not too worried about it. Like, if some part of my brain started feeling like, it was turning upside down or in a mush, or if I started
And if it's that weird,
If I was starting
it's
to feel-
weird to have a headache and you have
Yeah.
a headache, you'd be like, what the fuck is happening?
Right, exactly. Like, if my knee suddenly felt like it was turning inside out, I'd and nobody ever feels that, I'd probably be like, wait a minute,
He's a
something
b-
fucked up is
That's
going
another less useful analogy, but
Picard doesn't want to take the time out from like what he's trying to do to get to see the doctor.
Yeah,
He's a horrible patient. patient. He's never going to be like, okay,
Right,
I'm going to go
but
to the
We're,
doctor.
we're meant to understand that it's unusual for him to ask for help from the doctor, and he's being all awkward about it.
But the thing
Which
is,
indicates how serious it is.
but like if it was today and the captain got a headache and the doctor's like, we need to see you right away, I can understand them being like, oh, it's fine, it's just a headache. But this is literally a problem they don't have anymore.
Yeah.
So like he is a terrible patient, but you'd think, I don't know, maybe it's just he's just that terrible of a patient, you know? He just he refuses treatment.
He's really getting messed with. Captain Picard is like really off of his Captain Picard janks.
So this is the first time he refuses head treatment. Then later on, she's like saying, I'll want further exams. And he all looks at her. He's like, doctor! Like, he just like refuses. He looks at her like she's this total asshole. And then there's a third time, he started talking about smelling smoke. And we don't know why he was in the bed at that point. But it was another time he got looked at. Then, she wanted a fourth look after they were talking about the Picard maneuver, and he was just like sighing, and he was like, oh, you know. But then on the fifth time, she checks him out for the fifth time. This is before she drugs him, and he was finally on the fifth time. He was all for it. He's like, yes, do something. Right. Something's fucked up. And we never really found out why he got his headaches. We can assume that it was from the weird MacGuffin.
The clear implication is from the beach ball. Glowing beach ball thing.
But the thing is he started to get, or like, it was like, remember those jumping things?
Yeah,
those
that's what it was. I was thinking the same thing.
Those Nerf jump
where
things.
You stand on it, and it's supposed to be good for your ankles.
And it's supposed to make you jump. It's got a little ball. And it's
I don't
to
think
make
it makes you jump. I think you can jump with it.
You're supposed to jump it.
Yeah, but I don't think it makes you
pogo
jump.
No, it does. No.
Pogo ball. That's what
is
it's
it the
called.
pogo ball?
Yeah.
Well, I'm saying
Jesse's saying that all assertively, but I don't think that's what it is.
I
think Jesse's just saying that to try to get us to move forward.
It is a pogo ball.
It is
It's a pogo ball. I think that's what it says. Pogo ball.
Prove me right.
No, the thing is,
I don't believe either of you.
It's
and I'm not going to look it up.
Are you saying we're teaming up against you?
I'm saying you're both temporarily gone goofy in the head.
The pogo ball, it doesn't make you jump, but it's supposed to facilitate in you jumping, but it doesn't really do anything. No. So that's the thing. Yeah. So what were we talking about?
Well, we were talking about the teaser. We were almost at the end of it because basically, yes, Picard is blah, 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 headache, blah, 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 Zendi's business. And then they were like, oh, the Ferengi, we're supposed to meet up with them, but they're not answering. Oh, now they're answering. And then it's this whole like weird thing where Damon Bach is all like, ooh, and then Troy is all like cuts off the screen and she's all like, I sense deception.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
He's all like,
oh, we have a present for you.
A delicious present.
We won't give you. We're a species of people that are known for only profiting off things, but we'll give this to you.
And doing things with our fingers.
We'll give you this entire ship for free. No strings attached.
And do you know when? In 1 Earth hour.
1 Earth hour.
Earth hour.
And then later they told a human joke. Data was talking about a human joke, which I think
secondhand merchandise.
Was it Strange New Worlds where Spock? I think Spock said human joke too. I think that's been said a few times in Star Trek. By the way, that wasn't really even a joke. And they were talking about, because it was like they were trying to buy Data, and Riker was like, he's secondhand merchandise. He was trying to dissuade them from wanting to buy him.
It was a ruse.
It was
it was a ruse that was comical in the interpersonal construct that is Riker.
But it wasn't
Data,
but it wasn't specifically a joke. And it
did not have a joke structure with a sort of a setup and a punchline, the two key things that are required.
And
for a joke.
It was a quip.
And am I wrong?
It was witty. It was witty.
It
was a witty ruse.
A
witty ruse that had both the practical effect,
snappiness,
and had the amusing effect of offending Data, somebody who should not be able to feel offended.
Right. Well, Data was like all sorts of emotions this episode. Like when Wesley came up with the thing, he's like, how'd you do that?
Yeah,
how'd you do that?
Yeah.
And then
like,
later,
hey bro, you want to meet and talk about it later?
And then like when Data was like talking about a fancy way to beat the Picard maneuver, but Riker was all like, "Oh, I hope you're right." And he was like, "There's no question." What did he say? He said,
"There's no question," because he's an arrogant piece of shit.
Super serious about it.
Yeah, he goes, "No question of." He goes, "No question of it, sir." So he was like, super.
Even though earlier he was like, "There's no way to beat the Picard maneuver," which, by the way, that's stupid.
That is stupid. There's no defense. There's no defense against the Picard maneuver.
We'll discuss the Picard maneuver itself later in this particular podcast episode, but it is like right now we can put it out there that whatever the Picard maneuver is, it's a sci-fi thing. The idea that the android Data would be all like, "Oh, there's absolutely nothing you can do."
Yeah, we've never
is
figured it.
absurd.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
that was pretty dumb.
right.
Am I wrong though? When
About what?
When the was it Damon Bach? I don't know. He was commenting on about how like Troy had clothes on. She seemed, but she thought it was cute. I think she thought that was cute.
Well, Beta Zeds, at least I don't know if we know, it at this point, but they get married naked.
Yeah,
and they like to hang out naked.
But like the way he was saying it was definitely not.
They go to the mall naked.
But the way the Beta Zeds are naked is
Beta Zed Mall.
They play pickleball naked.
Pickleball.
I bet they
pickleball Beta
they
Zed
do.
style.
No, the way the Beta Zeds are naked is in this freeing sort of empowering kind of way. But the way the Ferengis was talking about Troy being naked was in this sort of degrading kind of ownership objectification way. So it was a different
matter of
intent.
perspective, I suppose.
What do you mean a matter of perspective? It was. That's the whole deal. Why
Ferengis, yeah.
Ferengis, yeah. That's how.
I mean, from a certain particular Western morality, absolutely, you're correct. But somebody else could view the Ferengi like a Ferengi would be like, no, the naked ladies thing, that's totally appropriate.
When you put clothes on them,
you're fucking full of shit,
obscene.
Patrick. You're totally full of shit.
I'm not defending them. I'm just saying.
The way that first of all, the
it's
way
Star Trek,
Oh God, the way the Ferengis are presented, the way they're presented is they're presented as having women not wear clothes because they're objectifying them.
I'm joking.
Okay. God damn it.
I'm literally not just, but I'm just putting. There should be.
I couldn't believe my ears. There was a whole episode how Moogie was like wearing clothes and it was like the worst thing in the world. But Beta Zeds do it because they want to be free. So it's just a difference in intent. And so I wouldn't think that she would think it was that cute. Yeah. But
I think you're correct.
And then when Bach goes, "We've heard of you females, clothed females, most interesting." Then Riker goes, "They are that, sir." Now, which was he saying? Was he saying which is interesting? Which was it? Was it that
Riker doesn't care. He just wants to fuck.
Yeah.
When he goes,
he's like, well, they're eventually going to take their clothes off.
No, when he goes,
in his experience,
when he goes,
what happens.
When he goes, "We've heard they use females, clothed females, interesting."
Use them.
And Riker
use them.
Riker goes,
Gross.
"They are that, sir." Which was he saying was interesting? Was he saying that it's interesting that they use females, or is it interesting that they were clothed? Do you think Riker was like,
Both.
was he saying like, yeah?
Since he was using the article "they," I have to presume he was referring to the women. The women are interesting. The clothed women is adding an adjective to women, but that's all the women that Riker regularly interacts with. So he's saying women are interesting.
Not the fact that they're wearing clothes is interesting.
Not the fact, no. Otherwise, he would refer to
and not
it being interesting, not they.
And he's not.
They are interesting as opposed to it.
And he's
it
not
being
saying
the fact that they are clothed.
And he's not saying that it's interesting that they use females. It's just that he's saying females are interesting.
I hope he's not saying it's interesting that they they use the term "use females" because that clearly was meant to be offensive.
I remember something before.
You remember
we got
Car 54?
Yes, Gunther Tootie. Before we got into the Pogo Ball discussion, that the reason he got the headache before he even met the Ferengi. He got it from the very beginning. And this was before he had the amplifier in that chest in his room. So why was he getting a headache?
They must have had
they
some
were
kind
beaming
of
it, and it was like a build up. It was like beam it from far away, minor effect as they get closer, get stronger.
That's what I was thinking.
Then the amplifier kicks into fucking high gear and Picard starts seeing ghosts and
That's
shit.
what I was thinking, but it's not entirely clear, I find.
How about this? Let's take a swift break.
Swiftly.
And when we return from said swift break, we will continue our discussion of Star Trek: The Next Generation, Season 1, Episode 9, The Battle. Thank you, Jesse. We'll be right back.
All right.
Are we back?
We're back.
Have we returned? Okay,
returned.
Before we get back to the discussion, a couple of bits of news. You got your weekly updates, weekly news. What's going on here?
News. That's the way the news goes.
Yes. So the audience still hasn't guessed which episode of Deep Space Nine I don't like.
Oh.
Last week I had mentioned, perhaps exaggerating somewhat, I had mentioned that there's really only one episode of Deep Space Nine that I really don't like.
And we haven't talked about it. A number of people, particularly on Twitter, have written in ideas for what it was. For some people saying it was a chrysalis or the baseball one. Move Along Home. It's definitely not that. It's none of those. Meridian, which is another. Yeah, it's blah. Right. There's a lot of ones that aren't so.
What's
great.
the one with that that woman who comes from the planet with no gravity.
Oh, that's Melora.
Okay.
Well, anyway, I don't know. Do you think that's a bad one? Is that a bad one? I think maybe it
I don't think it's bad.
I don't know. We'd have to
It's
think
just
about it.
kind of like
Sounds suspect.
whatever.
Well, we'll see. Anyway, just keep guessing. People haven't figured it out yet. You're going to be super disappointed when you do hear
It's a big build-up.
It's such a boring episode that people aren't even remembering it exists. So keep writing in on Twitter at It's Got Star Trek or feedback.
So it's not offensive. It's not
at
it's not that you don't
itsgotstartrek.com.
like it because it's offensive or something. It's just boring. and
It's just a
dull.
waste of my fucking time. Now, if an episode is offensive, there's at least some interest in it, and sort of a literary interest in what resulted in sort of the context of the times it was written and the structure of Hollywood at that time. And, there's stuff you can get out of that. You can improve your life by seeing something that's really stupid or really fucked up or really offensive, because you can sort of, it helps you think about the world. Some things are just a waste of fucking time. And that's what I consider this particular episode.
Man.
Anyway, I don't want to waste anybody else's time, so I just want to mention that. Also, we put the Pod Jam Trektacular. We put that on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
That I don't know if some of you might not know the existence of this. I think it's on the podcast feed super early. We recorded our first 8 episodes ahead of launch, where we went over all the Star
Ahead
Trek
of lunch?
pilots. Launch. So we went over the Star Trek pilots leading into the first season of
More
Picard.
like after dinner.
And Dan put together a nifty techno tune with clips from the first episodes. It's sort of fun to listen to. So anyway, that's on YouTube. So that's an enticement to go to our YouTube page.
It's on YouTube, so if you don't see it, it's on you too. It's on you if you didn't see it on YouTube. It's on you.
We are, Dan, just FYI, we are trying to entice people into going to YouTube. Anyway, so go to
Spice people. It's in Spice people.
I'm gonna have to add a laugh track under this so people know where to laugh. But yes, please go to YouTube. Just search for It's Got Star Trek or at It's Got Star Trek, because YouTube is doing that now with the at symbols. So go and subscribe. Go ahead and subscribe. You can get the podcast, and then we toss some other bonus stuff up there periodically. And finally, I thought this was valid Star Trek news that people might not be aware of in the Star Trek community. But on this week's episode of Scott Hasn't Seen, which is a podcast on the CBB World private podcast network, with Scott Aukerman of Comedy Bang Bang fame. Dan is bored of this conversation, but we'll get back to your little Ferengi butts in a second. You'll like this. You'll be intrigued by this. On this week's episode, they discuss Pretty Woman, because on this podcast, it's all about movies that Scott Aukerman hasn't seen, and he watches this movie and they discuss it usually with a guest. And this week's guest was Sarah Silverman. And at a certain point, they got on to discussing the Voyager episode Future's End, which we discussed not too long ago.
Yeah.
It was episode 143 of the podcast. Awesome episode.
Well, this one is 166.
This is 166. We love Future's End, but she was discussing working on that show, and she had mentioned that on the episode she kissed Tom Paris, but in real life, in between filming scenes, she was making out with Tim Russ.
What?
Isn't that wild?
That's tight.
Yeah, she said as she put it, she was like making out with Tuvok.
That's way more awesome.
I thought that was an interesting bit of news.
Do you think
that I wasn't aware
Do you
of.
think they got to second base?
What second base is defined in different ways across the country and across the world.
Like she was touching his ears.
Yeah.
I'm sure Vulcans like that. Maybe not as much as Ferengi with their umox.
Yeah, right. That's more of a Ferengi thing.
Moogie, human. All right. Well, anyway, that was my little bit of news. Dan seems to be in a rapture thinking about a young Sarah Silverman making out with a young Tim Russ.
I just want to know if they got into second base.
I don't know what second base means.
You do.
No, I don't, and I'm not that interested in hearing what your opinion of second base is.
Well, then why did you ask?
Because I have a feeling it would offend me. Not for real.
I mean, you asked.
Let me correct that. It wouldn't actually offend me, but it would be the kind of thing where I would have to feign offense because we were speaking in a public forum.
Well, you asked.
I did ask. So, okay, what is it?
You know.
All right. Let's get back to our conversation.
Crusher was talking about
yeah, we're on the first act. We finished the teaser. We can talk about the first act now.
Okay. First act.
It's the first act.
First act.
Which is Crusher, where she's like talking about the common cold.
Yeah, she talks about medical fakery when she gets rid of his pain. Like she's like, it's still there, it's just cloaked. She's basically gave him painkillers. That's all.
Yeah,
like it's like cloaked as pain.
It's
That's
also-
what ibuprofen is.
Right.
It's also an interesting philosophical question as to whether or not pain exists, since pain is primarily defined by the qualitative impact it has on a person's being. And if that person is not feeling that impact, does that pain exist? I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer to that question. I'm saying it's an interesting question. But Beverly seems to have firmly sided on the side that it exists, but she can pretend it doesn't using magic.
Well, pain exists as a self, or what's it called? Self-preservation. It's telling you something's wrong with your body.
I know what I'm saying.
And if it doesn't exist, that thing is still wrong with your body.
Yeah. Okay. I understand that. I agree with you.
Your body.
And again, I'm not trying to take a position.
It's wrong with your body.
I'm sure some people would argue that if the thing that is setting off your nerve endings that are sending the pain signals to the pain center of your brain, if that is still happening, but then you give somebody either a drug or some other magic future treatment that makes them not perceive that it's happening.
Give them fentanyl.
Some people might argue that is still feeling the pain, that the pain is there even if they're not feeling it. Other people would argue that pain only exists in the context of feeling it. Sort of like a shadow only exists as defining the not thing, the not there. It's what it isn't.
Negative space.
Yeah. Anyway, I didn't want to...
So you're saying if I took a bunch
Evil
of...
is the
This is
absence of
intended to be
good.
a lighthearted show, friends.
So if I was busted in the face, I mean, in a...
Do you mean getting hit in the face, or do you mean that using an early 2000s colloquial term that means that you're ugly?
The grill is through. Meaning,
what?
That's another way of saying busted in the face. The grill is through.
The grill is... I'm not familiar with
Like
that term.
like a grill, like the car.
No,
the grill
I
in a
understand.
car is
I'm
through.
appreciating the analogy. It's just not one that I'm familiar with.
Well, let's say somebody knocked me in the head with a baseball bat, and then they gave me fentanyl. Like the idea. So what you're saying is that most people would just say.
I thought we were done with this conversation.
So you're what you're saying is most people would just say like the pain is gone, but since she's saying the pain is there, it's just cloaked. It's bringing up a different philosophical question.
Yeah, or a different philosophical position. The question that most people don't even ask, but she has asked and taken a different position.
Clever.
Possibly, I don't know.
They should call her Cleverly Crusher.
And I'm no doubt in some circles that is what she is referred to.
So they called her in college.
Or perhaps in Picard season 3 when she comes back, which is going to be exciting. All right. So yes, Data's all super interested in boosting the sensors, as we mentioned earlier. And we mentioned the 80s style Ferengi being and the clothed females and all that other stuff. Now, season 1, Troy, we already made fun of the fact that she was stating the obvious. This happened a bunch of times in season 1. And by the way, caveat, and that's something I must make clear here. I really like Troy as a character, and I especially think Troy grew into being a very good character. There's just a lot of funny stuff particularly in season 1, where she's doing, she's just, first of all, either saying the obvious stuff or acting really weird. There's just like a weirdness about Troy, which I suppose you could say is like, oh, that's her being alien, but I don't know. It just felt a little weird to me. Might just be me. I respect that. I don't think Dan agrees with me. I think Dan thinks that Troy is super awesome.
No, Troy is weird. Her whole like outfit situation, like, you know, because she wore like some kind
I
of.
often forget about that. Then, until Jellicoe later on, years later, Captain Jellicoe made her put on an actual Starfleet uniform. She always had some non-standard uniform.
And that guy sucked.
And they were doing something crazy with her hair too. Like I couldn't stop looking at her hair this episode. Did she have that hairstyle a lot? I don't even remember.
She had a lot of different hairstyles.
That was the early on hairstyle.
Yeah.
But she did it up in different ways.
Yeah. Changing up.
Yeah. We have to remember that this is a early Rick Berman and Gene Roddenberry. I believe the character of Troy originally.
They were some wild boys.
Originally, Gene Roddenberry wanted the character to have 3 breasts.
Oh my God.
What?
That would be what would indicate being a Beta Z, having 3 breasts.
Oh man.
And they somehow figured out that wasn't something that was going to happen.
Beta Z is 2.
The character of Troy, which is unfortunately a common occurrence in this era of Star Trek, where you have these really great characters who are undermined because the writers and the producers, and not all of them, by the way, but specific
They
ones.
did that with-
We're like, we need to see boobs. We need to see tight, clingy
They did that
shit.
with Jolene Blaylock and
Yes.
Jerry Ryan.
Jerry Ryan. Those are
Yeah.
the crazy examples. Troy was the proto example. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, we won't give her 3 boobs. Well, we'll dress her in a completely ludicrous non-uniform, even though she's a Starfleet officer.
She sits to the left of.
She's a doctor.
She's on the bridge.
She's on the bridge, and she's just got the only thing that's special about her uniform is that her tits are hanging out.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a little ridiculous. They got bolder as the decade went on, and they got more ridiculous over time, it's unfortunate. The cool thing is that the actresses and the actors and the writers for those characters helped get past that. I think in all the cases with Troy, 7 of 9, and to Paul, they were all great characters in the end because they were able to push past the sort of silly 90s, early 2000s nonsense,
But
80s, 90s.
Yeah.
And today, the best of the 80s, 90s, and today.
But
The music that everyone can agree on, even the boss. Mix 107.3.
Even the boss.
All right. Okay. So Dan, you are always the first person. If Jesse or I pull out a snack, Jesse pulls out a little nut or a candy bar,
A bit of candy.
or I pull out a crunchy.
those things, I don't know, Jesse.
violet
I'm not the
crumble.
first to go for them.
No, that's not what I was saying. Don't jump ahead.
Well, then get to the point, mister.
Don't flip ahead in the.
Well, then get
this
to
isn't
the
a choose your own adventure book.
Then get to the point. Get
I'm
to the
saying
get to
you
the
are
meat.
always
Bottom line.
you are always correctly, by the way, you are always correctly the first person to say that we have to be, not that we can't have funny nibbly sounds on the podcast, but we need to warn people because some people have, what is it, misophonia or whatever.
Did I make a weird noise?
You were just making vomiting noises. You don't even realize you were literally like, and your skill, the degree of skill you have is of a sufficient degree, right, a sufficient level that basically you are able to replicate the sound of vomiting so well that you may actually cause people to get ill.
Whoa, that'd be crazy if everyone just started projectile vomiting at once.
It would be crazy in the colloquial sense of the term. However, we do want to avoid that.
That's a form of domestic terrorism.
Well, what am I trying to do here? I'm trying to hit the brown note.
So everybody poops their pants? You'll never do it. Never do it.
Yeah, but wouldn't you poop your pants too?
Yeah, but it'd be worth it.
Wouldn't we poop our pantses?
It would be
Stop
worth it.
trying to make me poop my pants.
Come on, man.
Damn it.
What's wrong with you?
Is this the Starfleet way?
That's
Are we living
like,
up to our Starfleet ideals?
Our best Starfleet
That's like the
selves.
Klingons or something.
Klingons around Uranus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uranus. One time I had a teacher that started to say Uranus. He said and then he said Uranus. He was like Uranus. He was going to say Uranus.
Uranus.
And Uranus is not the correct pronunciation. It really should be Uranus.
Yeah, but who wants to say shouldn't you say
I
like
want to say.
shouldn't you say like sexagon instead of hexagon?
No, but if the story is not apocryphal,
Snurbagon.
and my study of linguistics is not sufficient or broad enough to know if this is true or not, but I have heard that how you have Mars produces Martians and Jupiter produces Jovians.
Wait. Why did you just dismiss my sexagon thing? It's true. Sexagon.
No, I know, but I'm adding on to it, okay?
You said no. You said no.
Yeah, but that was not the no as in disagree no.
That was what other no is there? There's only a disagree no. I was like,
it's a verbal crutch.
I was like, shouldn't they call it sexagon? You're like, no. And then you went off to start saying something else entirely. You're like, no, shut the fuck up.
This shows how people can interpret things different ways.
Interpret things. You said the words. You said no, not me.
I'm just saying that there's a disconnect between the intention and the interpretation, and the fault.
I think
the fault may indeed lie entirely on this end.
Okay.
But
the rear end.
But I'm assuring you that I did not mean to offend you. I meant to bring up.
I'm not offended. I just thought it was curious.
All right. You look a little offended.
Are you guys married?
I just thought it was curious. I'll marry you. If you're not careful, Jesse, I'll marry you.
No. Okay. So, no, the point is, if you're from Jupiter, you're a Jovian. If you're from Mars, you're a Martian, right? If you're from Saturn, you're a Saturnian, I think. If you're from Venus, if you're following the correct linguistic conventions, according to a hilarious article I once read, the proper term would be venereal. Something from Venus is venereal.
Yucky.
But because venereal is already associated with venereal disease of the loins.
Break out your badges.
But yes, or other products.
Now we're gonna have to
that
give a
are
warning
penis,
about that.
penis associated. Penis.
Break out your penicide. Penicide. Oh no, I don't want
Break
that.
out your dick on fire medicine.
All right, but
Got flame shit
that's
out
an
my
interesting. That's an interesting little fact there. If
Yeah,
it
it is
happens to be
interesting.
true.
No, that is very interesting. I heard though that
So they came up with Venusian, which doesn't technically follow the way it's supposed to.
but I always read that girls go to knowledge to get more. Wait a second.
girls go to continue from there. Girls go to knowledge to get more
college.
College.
Boys go to stupider to get more Jupiter.
Yes. I think with your
That
recounting,
explains NASA.
your recounting of that aphorism proves that aphorism.
Yes, I believe it does. God damn it.
Okay, so back to the Ferengi business.
So Ferengi business. So yeah, as you were saying, Troy was like, hey, these guys are up to no good. I sense deception and danger. And like, as we said before, this is a species of people that are known for seeking profit for anything. So it's highly unlikely that they would just give a ship no strings attached. And like none of
There's
them,
strings.
and so they're just like going on. None of them like this whole episode. It's already been stated outright that these Ferengi are up to no good through.
Yes, we've stated that outright earlier.
We've stated that outright.
We made this observation.
I mean, they're Ferengi.
We saw how the Ferengi acted. Troy pointed it out for anyone who missed that, and yet they still didn't put any effort, not 1 ounce of effort, into preventing like any kind of trap from occurring. Like they didn't do anything. It's like they just acknowledged it.
It's like, what is Odo on their ship?
This is Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek.
They just acknowledged it, but they didn't do anything about it. So that's silly. It's silly.
Oh, there's a lot that's silly in this episode.
There was also the whole side thread of like Picard's, like they were like, oh, Picard fired first on an innocent ship, which didn't really go anywhere. I guess it was just supposed to like.
Well, they proved that it was a forgery, like they suspected. It was kind of like
but I mean, it almost seemed like it was just filling space because they were just like, oh, and they said this thing. None of us believe this thing's true. It's like, yeah, you better prove that it's not true. Okay. 5 minutes later, they're like, "Oh, we proved it's not true." It's like that's what I thought.
Riker's all like, "It sounds like your voice," and it's like, "It is. It is number one."
One thing that was funny about that was that the idea they're like, "Well, they must have simulated your voice," and the tone and the way that idea is brought up as like. It's a super sci-fi idea, even in like the context of 24th century. And of course, today, the idea of a computer making a voice is like, that's the easiest thing to do.
It's a super advanced idea for like 1987.
So I don't know exactly why they had that there. It was either to A, fill time, or B, just to show like how treacherous the Ferengi were, but also ultimately how incompetent they are because they weren't able to pull it off. Because there was no danger of anyone ever believing that Picard actually did this. So I'm like wondering, why did they throw that in there?
I agree with you. Now in the plot,
it doesn't.
In the plot, it even doesn't 100% make sense because what you could say is that in the plot, it's Damon Bach. He has multiple routes of revenge. One of them, he wants Picard to blow up his own ship or blow himself up or get killed in the process or whatever. The second is he wants to ruin Picard's career. And finally, perhaps most important, he wants to clear the name of his son, who we find out eventually. The whole thing driving this is that Damon Bach's son in his first command, in his first trip out commanding a ship, gets blown up by Picard because he's a shithead.
Which, when you look back, when Picard was like saying like the Battle of Maxia, I've never heard it referred to so dramatically before. Picard just shit all over Bach's son. Yeah. Like that was a fucked up thing to say. Even if he didn't know, like he knows, he can tell Damon Bach is pissed off about this, regardless of if it's his son or not, and he's just basically like, oh, that old thing, that was some stupid shit.
You know,
and you're some stupid shit.
His son was Damon Wayans. Yes, Jesse. You did the whole like, I'm gonna say something. And then you stopped talking.
I'm gonna say something.
You're gonna say something.
Let me say something.
How about this? I was going to say something real brief, which was that's the plot. The in-universe reason is that he wants to get the revenge multiple ways and clear his son's name.
Yeah, but
part of what makes it difficult for that to even be his motivation is because if everything goes according to plan, Picard is going to like destroy the Enterprise. Now, maybe he doesn't think that'll happen, and Picard, he just thinks Picard is going to get killed. But if he destroyed the Enterprise, there'd be no evidence unless the Enterprise is sending it back immediately. I mean, I don't know what the assumptions are. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, I guess maybe he was just trying to hedge his bets or something. I don't know, but and there was no interest in like how they solved the problem or anything. And yeah, I know it was. I don't know
what we should ask? We should ask Jesse what he thinks because he, because that whole thing.
Yeah, Jesse.
Super curious what you're going to talk about.
Oh, I was just going to say that, like the way the Ferengi guy is behaving, he's all about revenge. It's much more Klingon. It's not Ferengi at all. I mean, we already said it wasn't Ferengi like.
Yes,
but it's sort of reminiscent of what Klingons all about.
Yeah, but Klingons aren't
clearing like the name of their
but Klingons are into that.
Yeah, Klingons aren't.
Yeah, they're into
that.
Yeah,
they like that, and they're not about deception either. They don't believe in deception.
Right? Yeah, they wouldn't.
Well,
Klingons
I guess,
are like Vulcans.
Yeah.
it's all lies.
Yeah,
there's plenty of shitty ass Klingons.
There's
like,
some of those
like
shady Klingons.
That's true.
Because like they probably bought that device off of some shady Klingon.
What show? Well, that was in Lower Decks, where it was the one where there was the Torg, that guy had the Torg, and there was on the Klingon ship, and he was all like, "Oh, you're trying to win by deception. That's not the Klingon way." Yeah, but you're right. Yeah, I guess it is kind of Klingons do the fair amount of like
the revenge and the
deception.
Like you killed my son or my dad or
you killed my daddy. You killed my daddy.
Well, they got the whole Duras family throughout multiple generations. I sometimes feel bad for the Duras family because they were always shown as being like sneaky and sniveling and partnering with like Romulans and shit. And
Romulans.
And it goes back to like Enterprise. Like anytime Duras shows up, it's like, oh, these people are pieces of shit. In fact, they should do like one where like there's a Duras who's like awesome. Anyway, I've said my piece about the Duras family.
Did you notice?
I did. I noticed
things.
That when Picard left that room after... See, here's another confusing part about like Picard's ready room when he was talking to Crusher.
You mean not his ready room, his conference room in his bedroom or his den. It's like his den. And because in high definition, did you notice how the carpets are hilarious? Like, pay attention to TNG high definition transfers because the carpets are fucking hilarious. Not all of them are bad, but some of them you can just see all the footprints and you see where they dragged the desk around and
really?
stuff. It's just very clear in the HD.
That's pretty funny.
Obviously, they didn't think it was going to show up.
So we know, and I know from looking at this schematic of the bridge, there's the turbo lift that we see at all points when they walk in, their main turbo lift. But then there's that turbo lift up front where if you're facing away from from the view screen, if you're facing towards...
Now, which schematic are you talking about, sir?
Which turbo lift are you talking about? Please provide more details.
I am in the middle of providing fucking details.
All right.
Well, like, it's not like I stopped and said, you know that? You know that part? I was in the middle of giving details.
This is where the podcast format suffers a little compared to the Wikipedia format because Jesse and I could be clicking on the links to get more, to get more details as we're reading along.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
You say something and then we could be like, we could click on the link and then come back.
Schematic of the bridge.
Doesn't work in a podcast format.
I got this from CygnusX1.net, Galaxy Class Upper Deck. It's basically what...
Oh, no, that's a website I am acutely familiar with, Dan. I spend a lot of time on that website.
Up.
No, I do.
Do you?
I do. I have it bookmarked.
Weird.
They have a good screenshot section.
I could see that.
So, anyways, this says the NCC 1701D is what it says for the bridge.
Was this what you were on about before the podcast started? You were all
you
were trying to get a schematic of a Galaxy class ship, but you were looking specifically for the Enterprise D.
According to this, like, let's say you... Okay. Let's say the view screen, if you're on the position of the view screen looking at like Picard and the whole crew, it's like looking at a stage, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm not getting...
All the universe is a stage.
I'm not getting into the whole stage right, stage left thing because that's too confusing. But if you're looking away from the view screen, to your 1 or 2 o'clock, there's your main turbo lift that we see all the time. That they're coming
you're standing in front of the view screen looking at the bridge.
Yes.
So you're looking at
I
Worf.
got you.
You're looking at Worf up there.
Yeah. And to the right of Worf is
the main turbo lift that most people are coming in and out of.
Now directly to my right, like on
in the front, that's the ready room.
And there's another turbo lift there.
There's doors to Picard's ready room. There's a turbo lift on the other side that goes to the battle bridge.
Right.
And then the doors at the top go to the observation lounge.
So there's the ready room, and then there's a turbo lift. And according to the schematic behind the turbo lift, there's like a reserve turbo lift, but we don't need to worry about that.
Now the ready room is where he has that little desk, or reasonable sized desk,
and he has his fish and stuff.
Right. So when he was coming out of the room,
the certain fish.
When
he
was
has fish at the
when
other
he
one,
was
too.
because there was only one room.
Patrick Stewart always hated the fish.
There was only one room.
He didn't hate the fish. He hated the idea of having fish. Sorry, I just had to get it out there.
Is he like against like trapping fish?
Yeah, he thought it was fucked up. So finally they were able to. You know.
I see. Yeah.
So and whenever you saw Picard, like, you know, having a headache, being in the room, what we would normally associate as reading room, but we decided it was this weird conference bedroom thing, right? There was only one room. We never saw his modern day ready room, but you'll see.
No, we did see his ready room briefly. When Riker comes in and Geordi and Data, they're all like telling him that it's fake. That's when he's already like ready to start flinging shit on the Stargazer.
There was one scene, and I'm pretty sure it was like after he was talking to Beverly in that weird room, where he walked out into the bridge as if he was walking off the turbo lift from the front.
Turbo.
You know, the lesser used turbo lift,
Right.
like the one that goes to the what was that other bridge?
The battle bridge.
So
Cafeteria.
if you watch him walk out of that room, of his weird conference room,
of his own volition,
when he walks out of the room, that's the where he's talking to Crusher, and he has that bed in there. He's walking out of that room, and he goes directly into the bridge from the turbo lift that would normally go to the battle bridge. If you look at, you'll see that.
Weird.
Yeah, and you don't see, and it looks like it's supposed to be going to his ready room.
Supposed to.
So you just look at that next time, and you'll notice that when he's walking out, it's totally like, I don't understand like what that room is supposed to be.
All right, I will make a note.
There's another episode
the next
where
time
you
I
see
watch
his
this episode, I'll do
quarters,
that.
and you just see like he's just sitting on a sofa, and you can't see anything else. And like it's just like this front-on shot of him on a sofa trying to read a book when some shit happens. Or
Yeah.
Maybe he has
He's
like
got a sofa in his ready room too.
maybe he's got several.
Sometimes he's chilling there too.
Yeah, maybe he's got several like these conference rooms with
He
their own
has several
beds.
desks.
He had
has
like
several
a drink.
sofas.
I remember him having a drink though,
Do you
like a drink, and not like a tea.
Yeah, sometimes
So
he's drinking whiskey.
It may have
or
been
bourbon.
in his actual quarters.
Do you think he actually has a separate like office that also has a bed? Like, do you think he's got several beds strewn
Do you
throughout?
think he has more beds than desks?
No. Who would have that?
Okay. To continue the discussion of this particular story,
Wild boy.
According to this schematic, it says the turbo lift to the battle bridge is to the left.
yes, it's to the left if you're looking at Worf.
Okay, so I was talking about to the right. So on
No,
this,
to the right is the ready room.
right, and according
That
to the
would be
schematic,
Worf's right.
to your right is also next to the ready room is another turbo lift. It's saying.
What I propose we do.
So there's like 3 turbo lifts.
I propose.
Well, it's the bridge, baby.
Plus a backup turbo lift.
I propose that we take another break,
yeah.
and at the conclusion of this break, when we
Yeah.
return,
We'll go fuck.
I've told you, Dan, after the podcast.
Okay.
No, we will.
That's on the Patreon.
We will continue. Well, we'll see. We'll see if we really need cash. All right, we'll be right back, and then when we will talk more when we come back. All right, we'll be right back. Bye. All right, we're back.
We came right back.
Welcome to the It's Got Star Trek podcast, episode 166, where we're discussing Star Trek: The Next Generation, season 1, episode 9, The Battle. The Battle.
Did you
the
know?
Battle.
Did you notice that Bach's MacGuffin was a lot bigger than like Picard's MacGuffin? Like when Bach was all turning his MacGuffin in circles, like it was all big.
Well, he's a little guy.
I think it was also big.
But right, yeah, it was bigger.
Dan was about to get incensed. You're like,
Because Riker was holding it in
Riker's
the palm
a
of his
giant,
hand.
sexy man, and Bach is a withered, monstrous little creature.
That whole thing, it was some kind of complex bit of circuitry, but for some reason it only had one control. It just had a volume knob. All you could do is ramp
I know,
it up.
it was just super MacGuffin-y.
Yeah, and
It was like it was a reject from like a droid on Star Wars. Like they were like, no, we can't make this into a
It was
droid."
like 2 MacGuffins. That's the other funny part. It was just awkward because it was like, hey, yeah, you know what's even better than one MacGuffin? You know what? It's the fucking
We got this
1980s.
other one.
Toss in a second MacGuffin.
And when he was...
You get double MacGuffin.
And so it's this complicated thing that's supposed to control your brainwaves and make you do what specifically? I don't know, because it apparently only did one thing, and you could only turn the volume up.
Makes you crazy.
But in order to work it, you had to stare at this weird screen with weird patterns on it. Somehow, turning the thing up and down fucked with some shit on a screen that allowed you to... I'm assuming it allows you to control people's brain in whatever way you want. Now, how you do that with a screen and an up and down lever, I don't know how that works.
And it was something that was illegal, like universally uncool, that even those other shady Ferengi, they were like, no, we don't. That's bad news.
And it's so illegal, we've never heard of them again.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
Even though they would have had utility in a number of different scenarios.
Yeah.
Maybe you could control it by using your hand. Maybe you could drag your hand along the red surfacey part,
It's like a theremin.
or maybe that's how it works. Because why did he need that screen? What was that screen telling him? No one knows.
I don't know. I don't. Yeah, I'm not Ferengi.
Yeah, I don't know. Did you notice at the end when when Riker was telling Picard to shoot the silver ball? That was a red ball. Do you think they made
it had so much red on it?
Did they make it red in post? Like why?
Hey, there's a couple. Well, I will say
it did have silver, but it was
red. If you're gonna call it anything, you're calling it a red ball.
I don't know about that because I didn't find any lore or information about it. Mm-hmm. However, I did learn through some research on the interweb.
The interwebs.
I did learn that, as written in the script, the Stargazer was to have been a Constitution class ship, and it was going to have been. They would have reused the Star Trek: The Motion Picture Enterprise model.
They did that
for the Stargazer.
They used the bridge set.
But yes, precisely. And that was even while they were filming, they thought it was going to be a Constitution class. So at one point, Geordi makes a reference. Get this, Dan. I can tell it's blowing your mind the way
I don't
you're
know what
looking
this
at me.
has to do with the MacGuffin.
Nothing. But I'm saying it's related in the sense that you asked if it was silver and so they changed it.
It's got nothing.
Because what happens is Geordi, actually, LeVar Burton, on the day when they filmed, actually said the Stargazer is a Constitution class.
I thought I heard somebody say that shit.
And they dub over it. Well, not dub over it, but they did an ADR where Geordi LeVar Burton comes in and says it's a Constellation class. And it was called a Constellation class because Constellation fit over Constitution's lip movements.
I've been on both the Constellation and the Constitution.
And furthermore, the Constellation class Stargazer was a kit bash where they took pieces from different models and just sort of like at the last minute, like hurriedly put it together. And it's pretty rad because it's a kind of awesome looking ship in my book. Yeah. In my book, awesome looking ship.
What, the Stargazer?
The Stargazer.
Wait, so are you saying this is like my comment about the silver MacGuffin because it was different than what it originally was or something?
Yes, because Riker says shoot the silver thing.
Yeah.
If indeed that's what he says. I have no recollection.
Okay.
And I don't have it in my copious notes.
Right. The Stargazer was cool looking, but that had the most ridiculous captain's chair. Like the whole
the captain's chair was absurd.
That was
where it traps you.
Yeah, like Picard, Patrick Stewart looks so silly sitting in there.
Completely fucking silly.
And he stands up and whips this shit off and goes, "No, you got stop." And then he sits down, he's like, "Ruff," and he puts it back on again. He puts on the cover
I will say
again.
though,
I guess that was supposed to be where the controls go or something.
I thought the first time that Picard beams over to the Stargazer a little earlier in the episode, everyone else is beamed over first, and they did the whole dramatic thing where the captain beams over after everyone's checked it out briefly. And when he beams over, they do that cool Star Trek theme, the classic, right?
Oh, yeah, they do.
And you know how it goes? Synthy. Can you you're our music guy here? Exactly, right?
I don't have a range. But it's all synthy. You could tell because it was like.
Yes.
Oh yeah, totally. You got it on that one.
But then they played the little bell noises over the strings that went like ding, 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 ding,
ding, ding, ding, ding.
When Worf goes to
bong.
When Worf is searching through
bong.
When Worf is searching through the ship, he goes, "The rest of the ship is clear of surprises, Lieutenant Yar." Oh,
Yar.
Little does he know
Yar.
that ship is full of more surprises.
He didn't do a very good sweep.
No, he didn't. When when Data was talking about the checksums, when he was like,
Yes, I wrote a note about how that was clearly meant to be all like nerdy and esoteric, and nowadays everyone's like, I know what a checksum is.
And then and when Riker goes like, what does that mean? If you watch LeVar Burton, it looks like he's trying to hold back laughter in that scene. He looks like he's about Data busted him up.
Computer science lesson. When he's like,
Yeah, but like LeVar Burton, like really looks like he's holding. That's like when people talk about seeing other people actors hold back laughter. I don't always catch it, but that one, like he looked like he was about to be busted up.
They call it corpsing, you know?
Corpsing?
Corpsing.
Corpsing?
Corpsing.
Corpsing?
It's called corpsing. When you laugh, when you're an actor and you get into a fit of laughter, it's called corpsing.
I thought it was in SNL. They're always talking about breaking.
That's an alternative term.
Yeah.
Corpsing may be more popular in England and the British Isles.
When Picard was all
It was used here as well.
when controlled Picard,
Could be a theater versus a live
when
theater.
possessed Picard was all talking shit to
Possessed Picard.
Riker. He's like,
good old pee-pee.
he starts talking about like the conservation of tractor beam power.
Yes. Oh,
It's like
that
a
was so
lecture.
stupid.
That was stupid. That requires a lecture. That's just regular old inertia. That's
It just sounded, no, but it also just sounded like some bullshit too, because he was like, "Don't you remember your class?" Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And Riker was like, "What the fuck are you talking about?"
Yeah.
dude?
There's
We
not
got plenty of power.
like
We got fucking antimatter engines on this motherfucker.
yeah.
We're not gonna run out of power.
like, I'm
Goddamn
going to
it!
sneak aboard the Stargazer.
Well, basically what he was saying, that's just inertia. Like if something is following along with you in space, you don't need to give it any power. It can just go on its own. And so he was trying to say it had to do with something about conservation of tractor beam power. That's just like there's no class on. There would be no class on that. That's just how inertia works.
I also like when Riker's trying to contact the first officer of the Ferengi ship, and he's like, he's like, Starship Ferengi, as if that's its name. You know, it's like the Starship Enterprise.
I didn't notice
Or
that.
Starship
Packlet.
Saratoga. He's like the Starship Ferengi. He didn't say Ferengi Starship. And by the way, I have to presume that in the script it said Ferengi Starship, because they've done that in the past. If a ship has not revealed its name, you know, doesn't have its transponder on or something, they'll say Klingon bird of prey, respond. You know, Ferengi warship, respond. I think it must have been that in the script, but Riker, Jonathan Frakes got it wrong backwards. He was like Starship Ferengi, because otherwise why would they name their ship Starship Ferengi? Unless it's like a Packlet thing where they're all like all the ships are named Ferengi.
Ferengis aren't
Planet.
stupid.
No, Ferengis are smart.
Well, that when they had them on the
You
view
are
screen,
smart.
when he had them on the view screen, what was the deal with that all white background on the Ferengi ship?
What it was is they couldn't afford to build a Ferengi bridge.
Right, it was completely weird.
They usually would show the Ferengi close up in those early episodes.
Yes.
Because and in the first one, it sort of deceives them because they think that they're bigger than they are.
Well, did you notice that you rarely see Alf in full form? Like it's always like him behind a couch or below the camera.
Yes.
Sometimes lower half below.
Do you know why that
Really?
is? Do you know why that is?
Because he's a puppet.
Precisely.
Alf
I'm just glad
is a
you're
puppet.
glad you're aware of it.
You know that it's not real, right?
So Picard's
Shit.
ghost friends, right, in his dream, and then later in his, I guess, hallucination,
Those people that are just sitting at some burning console.
and not saying a word. So it's really peculiar because there's people talking and they're showing, and when somebody's talking, they'll show a ghostly person sitting at their console, but they're sitting there not saying anything,
Yeah.
which I have to assume, again, was because they didn't want to pay these people, the actors, the SAG fees,
God damn it.
because it's a much different fee.
Right.
You get paid as an actor if you have any lines, even if you have one word line. So they have them sitting there quietly, and then they're paying the other rate to voiceover actors to do the voiceovers. So I have no doubt Roddenberry or somebody was back there being like, all right, here's what we're going to do. We'll have the people just sit there weirdly, not saying anything, and then we'll pay other people way less a voice actor rate in order to say the words over top.
Every time he was sort of slowly falling deeper into the past, you could hear their voices when he was having dreams, but
Yes.
you didn't see them on camera. So I wonder how that works with like the voice actors. Like, how do you pay voice actors that don't get camera time? Do they still get do they get a SAG card? I don't even know how that shit works.
I'm not sure. And in the 80s was probably different rules. I'm guessing though that it just seemed to me so overt and not, and so clearly not a creative choice.
Yeah.
Because it didn't mean anything.
Yeah, because they look
Right?
weird.
And by the way, Rob Bowman directed this. Rob Bowman is fantastic. He directed
13 episodes of TNG early on, first couple seasons, but most people know him. He became most famous on X-Files because he directed a shitload of X-Files episodes. He directed the first X-Files movie. He was a producer on the X-Files. So you see the name Rob Bowman show up in that X-Files font. Talking about fonts. You should download the X-Files font, and you should send me emails exclusively in the X-Files font.
That's ridiculous.
But I would like
would
that.
do such a thing?
I'm requesting that as a friend.
We don't always.
I want to get X-Files
That's what a friend does, Dan.
We don't always get what we want in life.
I liked on the X-Files when it would have our local neighborhood show up, right? Like at the bottom of the screen.
Like Alexandria.
It would be like Falls Church or
Yeah.
Annandale. Or what, you know, it would just be something in Virginia.
It'd be like a bunch of pine trees.
Yeah, and they'd be driving past like 300-foot tall
Yeah.
pine trees in total darkness. All right. Okay, next bit of information, entertaining information.
Picard information. I am an information. So Picard was talking about doing what any good helmsman would do. Now, it didn't look like he was a helmsman when he was on the ship. It looked more like he was captain. He was at least commanding.
He's just talking about driving the boat.
Well, our understanding of the Stargazer situation is the Stargazer situation helped propel Picard's Starfleet career because the captain died.
Oh,
and so he had to take over, and he saved them.
I didn't realize that. So
by taking over, I think that's what happened.
I don't think they ever overtly said that.
I don't know if they said it in this episode. I think it might have been mentioned in a previous.
So he wasn't the captain.
Because like all I heard in this episode was him talking about being a helmsman, and then we see a shot of him on the Stargazer acting as captain. That's all I saw.
Well, we can
He
certainly
was just
infer.
acting as captain. He was just a bridge off.
I'm fairly certain it was stated explicitly that his taking command in an emergency situation when the captain was killed is how he advanced in his career.
Maybe
That could have been a later episode. That one where they're talking.
The people in the audience who know
are
the
you making
answer
fun of
are
me?
yelling at their
I
podcasting
wasn't.
devices.
I know. It's like these guys are supposed to be smart.
We never promised that. We have a caveat.
Yeah, no, we never said that.
We really don't.
That was not part of the deal.
We are
Helmsman.
not intelligent
It
people.
was
So-
comedy.
I guess the overall purpose of this episode was it was cool because it gave you some lore about Picard. It was like talking. I guess you could say like
Give
the
us
whole
some data about
And it
Picard.
gave you some data too.
gave you some data about Picard. I guess the whole. I mean, if you want to talk about what was the point of the tangent about like him firing first on that whole weird side plot about like the
if you
fake.
want to talk about it.
If you want to talk about it, you
wanted
don't
to
have
talk
to.
about
I
it.
guess you could say it sort of like reinforced the idea that he's this honorable guy, and then it like gave him some lore. Because I guess trying to think of back then, what do we know about Picard back then? I guess and it's like gave us. They never talked about the Stargazer before, had they?
I think they did.
They
I
did?
can't recall off the top of my head, but I'm pretty. I think it was a reference.
Some
to
sort
it.
of mention of
So
that.
then it's kind of like, and I guess.
Maybe even an encounter at Farpoint.
It was just I was just trying to figure out the whole purpose about the whole thing. I guess Ferengi. I guess
You could say the same thing
revenge
about
and-
life, Dan.
Yeah,
You could say the same thing about life.
Well, you could, but
It's not the kind of thing that a regular old podcast like ours can address.
see, but there was
sometimes stuff just happens.
And sometimes it doesn't.
So there was like
Sometimes-
after
Sometimes you
Picard.
feel like a nut.
So after
you
Picard,
don't.
after Picard shot the silver really red pogo ball thing, right? It did a classic like old school slow mo like flying away, dude. Kind
Yes.
of like it was cheesy.
Yeah.
It was
that was a big explosion.
It was cheesy in a similar way as the conspiracy was cheesy. Not as cheesy as like when they exploded that head.
Oh god.
But like, but it had that cheesiness quality to it. And by the way, they could have at least dyed the stunt double's hair maybe a little bit more gray. I don't know. That stunt double's head didn't remind me of Patrick Stewart's head when he was like flying away. Anyways,
I didn't pay attention.
I
Yeah, me
paid
neither.
attention. But
I just let my suspension of disbelief
yeah, it's not a big deal.
cloud over
It wasn't
any
bad.
sort of logical
It's,
stuff.
Star
it's
Trek.
fun. But
Star Trek.
but-
You gotta love it.
Trek.
but when he
Knock,
woke,
knock, who's there? It's Star
but when he
Trek.
got knocked, he got his lights knocked out or whatever. When he got fucked up and he stood back up and they're like, Picard, are you okay? And he's like, yes, I'm great. And
Yes, I'm great.
he immediately has this like very sort of like deep like moralistic what's the word I'm looking for the
Yeah, 'cause Star Trek used to always have that little tag at the end.
yeah the what's the word I'm looking for the
Couldn't tell you.
the moral of the story. I don't know that he
Moral.
yeah
moral-
that's what but it's
moral
like he had it ready where he goes in revenge they were saying something about the revenge wasn't profitable.
Yeah, it
And
never
he goes,
is.
in revenge, there never is. Let the dead rest, and the past remain the past. Like that was pretty. I like that line. That was like a
that's
cool
good.
line.
That's
It was
good.
just kind of funny. He just like thought of that like out of nowhere.
It was sort of cheesy.
And it was like the dude had just been fucking knocked the fuck out. Like he had
That's
just
why he's captain.
he just came to after being possessed. He just exploded some shit, got knocked across the room, and he had his wits about him enough to make this line. But
That's captain shit, dude.
but like that had to have been like representative of some kind of theme they were going for with the episode in general. But it's like it didn't quite hit.
This was more in the category of an interesting, fun sci-fi story. With hints of a moral that are not particularly creative. The idea that revenge,
I think he's just trying to
isn't
wrap
great is
it
not-
up.
not like a particularly interesting.
No.
thing. I mean, it's not particularly new. I enjoyed it, but it's nothing.
And I mean,
groundbreaking.
And it did
No.
it did give us a little lore about Ferengis a little
Totally.
bit.
Oh,
So,
absolutely! I think
yeah.
it's a worthwhile
Yeah, it is.
tale for a season 1 episode, which they
Yeah.
can be. They are janky.
Yeah.
I think season 1 episodes are kind of like if you're watching sort of season 3 through season 7 or so, or
season
certainly
3.
through season 6 of TNG, it's very comfortable for people of our generation,
stuff.
for people who have.
That is
and
what
or
I'm talking about.
who have watched a lot of TNG and it's sort of comfort food for them. Those are the seasons that are the most comfort.
Which
food.
ones?
Like 3 through
Oh,
6, 3
yeah,
through 7. Some people might argue with 7, but the point being is like when they're more fully formed as characters and there's a
Kind of like The Simpsons seasons 3 through 7.
yeah, they've grown into it, right? But when you're watching seasons 1 and 2, it's like, okay, there's an awkwardness that's not a bad awkwardness necessarily. I'm entertained by it, but it's like these are my characters, but they're not acting properly.
Right.
Their uniforms are a little weird. The music's very, very loud.
It's very, very loud.
Very, very loud. Not bad. None of this is bad. It's just different. Beverly Crusher is talking about like headaches are bullshit. You know,
She was
stuff
also
like that.
she was also calling at one point she calls Riker number 1.
Oh, I hated that. I did not like that at all.
It was weird. She's not supposed
She
to
just
do
casually is like number 1.
Number 1. What? She doesn't do that. And then she was also weird. She called a Picard captain. Like she usually says Jean-Luc, but it was somehow
This is early
she
on,
was
I guess.
early on. But so there's an excuse for that one. But her calling Riker number 1, there's like no excuse.
No,
for
I
that.
didn't like it at all. I hated it.
I hated it. I hated that.
I did think it was funny when Wesley, because we didn't talk too much about Wesley. Or, you know, Wesley is all like, he's like, I know, Mom, but this is important. And then later he's all like, adults.
There were two weird.
He was
like,
right,
"You're
by
welcome,
the way. He was
ladies."
right.
There were two weird lingering line moments in this episode.
Linger longer. Linger gaga.
So
So
one where Troy,
My Dog Blue.
the one where you were talking about where Wesley.
These are
was,
Grease Man references, by the way.
Nobody
For people-
knows what the
for
fuck
I
that-
know, for people outside
Jesus Christ.
of the Mid-Atlantic area who did not listen to the crazy asshole
Okay.
in the 1980s and 90s named the Grease Man. It's a piece of shit.
Okay,
But he
so
was funny. He always went hobbly gaga.
So there was
Hobbly-giggy.
there was a scene you were talking about where Wesley gave him some info that didn't make any sense, but somehow you got what he was saying. Troy was like, "Let's get to the captain." Crusher's like, "No, they might be affecting
Get to the captain.
So it might be affecting the captain. They said to Riker, and they leave, and then Wesley just hangs on Wesley, and he's like, "You're welcome, ladies, adults."
Yeah.
But then there was one more where like LaForge was talking to Riker, and Riker's was like, "I'll take it in the ready room, secure channel, LaForge." And then it like Riker goes into the ready room, and you can see Riker's all like worked up about something, and then it just lingers on LaForge, and he's like, "Secure, sir."
Yes,
like,
I know, right?
Like sarcastic
Oh,
sort of
and
response.
you mentioned Riker. You brought up Riker because I have to note that Riker's famed signature twitchy left lower eyelid was particularly twitchy this episode.
I didn't notice.
He does this thing when he's concerned and staring at somebody where he like wiggles his left eye
wiggles
lower
his
eyelid.
booty?
No, he doesn't wiggle his booty.
booty. He wiggles his booty.
Dan, Dan.
wiggles his booty.
Dan, we've discussed this.
Wiggles his booty.
Dan,
Man.
Dan.
I gotta think of another catchphrase. Wiggle the woogle. Hey guys, wiggle the woogle.
But yes, look for the.
They'll be saying it on the internet
look
all day
for the-
long.
Look for the
You're
wiggly
Patrick's
lower.
poking himself in the eyeball right now.
No, I'm pointing at my lower eyelid.
It looks like you're poking. From here, it looks like you're
I
poking
mean, I'm
your
poking it a
eyeball.
little.
Lighting's not so
He is
good.
poking.
I'm making it so that I'm getting double vision. You know?
me. He's got double vision.
do do do
That's sort of right, isn't it? Anyway, okay. We got to continue. So other things to say before we close out. Oh, yeah. Wesley's jumper, nothing special about this.
When did Riker give? I want to know when he gave the eye twitch. At what point?
Throughout the entire episode.
Oh, okay.
He keeps doing it. As in any moment where Riker is concerned, take a look. It's in a book.
Is it a book?
It's a reading rainbow, motherfucker. Riker's eyeball, not his eyeball, his lower eyelid twitches. Okay. Patrick Stewart utilizes his theatrical training here to the max when he's on the Stargazer, doing all the commands and walking around the ship and pretending to cough. That's why you hire a Shakespearean actor, because they're not gonna give you any shit about having to do this.
Well, when he was
on television,
when he was drugged up, when he was passed out, drugged up from Crusher, and he was like, reliving that scenario. Like, he's like wandering around, and at the end, he just starts going fire.
Yes,
fire.
But what I was saying earlier is Wesley's jumper. This is nothing unique to this episode, but it has the three colors of the three command divisions. Not the three divisions, right? Yellow, blue.
The two Utes.
Yellow, blue, and red. Because he's still learning. He hasn't decided what he's going to do with his life.
He's not even a real ensign.
He's not even a real nothing. He's not a real nothing.
He keeps trying to.
He's a nobody.
He was trying to sneak up on the bridge to catch a glimpse of the Ferengi, like a little scamp.
Well, that's certainly what Picard accused him of. I don't know if he did or not.
I think that's what the implication was.
It is a little weird that he didn't just utilize the very modern communications intercom technology.
Maybe they just wanted to throw Wesley into the episode more, and they couldn't think of a way to do it. So
other than making him look like an asshole.
None of the main characters are on engineering in the first season, so it was easy for him to sneak on to engineering and start messing with shit.
Oh, right. Yeah, he was fucking with shit.
Yeah.
He was fucking with shit.
Picard maneuver is stupid, I think. To me, it's stupid, right?
So you have to have perfect timing to do it, because they're talking about it creates two versions of your thing at the same time, right?
It's what any good helmsman.
But
it's relying on something that doesn't make sense in the context of the Star Trek with warp, like a world that has warp drive.
Right, because you wouldn't have two copies of yourself. You'd have a continuous copy of yourself, and it would only last for a tiny fraction of a second.
Yeah.
So you'd have to time it down to the split second perfectly when to hit the blasters, because if you hit it too soon, then they would just see, oh, he moved there now, and if you hit it too late, they'll just hit you. So you have to do it right as they're firing, and at that point, why do you need a second copy of yourself? That second copy would only be there for such a short period of time, and like I said, it wouldn't be a second copy. It would just be one long copy of it.
It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
And didn't they do the Picard maneuver in the Picard show?
I don't know. Did they do something?
They did some kind of wacky Picard maneuver where there was a bunch of copies of.
You're talking about when he pulls down his tunic. When he pulls down his tunic.
No, that's not what we're referring to. That's a different Picard.
So, what are your all's opinion on the Picard maneuver?
I just said it. I think it's silly. I get it. I get it as a funny thing to do in the episode, but I don't know.
It's cool that
there's no defense against it.
They're establishing some Picard lore. This is one of the things that gives him a name, but it's whatever.
What's your name? My name is Picard.
The other good Picard line, the one was at the end, but then the other one was when he's talking about going on the Stargazer, and he goes like going back to the house you grew up in, but no one's home except the phantoms of the past. I started thinking about an old house I grew up in. I started getting all creeped out and sitting weird.
It's pretty creepy.
Yeah, that was a fun line. It was a fun line.
It was a fun
line. We should try to visit all the houses we've ever lived in.
All right. Any additional things? Any additional items?
So the way you defeat the Picard maneuver is because even deep space contains trace gases. A vessel doing the Picard maneuver might seem to disappear, but their sensors could locate any sudden compression of those gases. Yes. That doesn't seem that complicated. I mean, not saying I could have figured it out, but it's they would have figured it out by now.
And a few years later,
I mean, it's the fucking Enterprise.
Star Trek 6, they find the cloaked ship by the gas of the ship.
Right.
So it's a similar concept.
And it's funny that nobody bothered to ask Data before then, or any kind of computer before then, how to defend against the Picard. I guess they never had to, but you'd think someone would have at least studied it,
No, because
it's secondhand merchandise.
Because it doesn't work and it's stupid and it never came up, and they just, they use it to make Picard feel better about himself.
It was funny when they showed the shot of the they would show the shot of the Enterprise tractor tractor beaming
Tractors?
tractor beaming the Stargazer.
Yes.
So that was cool. But then at the one part when it like zips away,
Yeah.
they're like, it's getting away, and then it's carrying it. And
It
they're
looked
like,
hilarious.
That was
Well,
pretty
I
dope.
did want to comment on the fact that despite the special effects being fairly old, I thought they're very well composed.
Oh, yeah,
right?
I
And these
thought
are
so.
of course they've been
Yeah.
they've been updated a little bit in this format, but they are Rob Bowman and others composed well. It was striking imagery with a couple goofy things aside, right? I thought it was nicely done. Nicely done, I say.
Kazago, at one point, he's all growls. He goes like, wow. Because Riker's all talking about like something being profitable, and he's all like, so apparently it takes a day for wherever they were. It takes a day for the message to get from subspace back to home.
Yes.
I
They
thought
did a lot of that early TNG.
I thought subspace was supposed to be faster.
It
than
is.
that.
That's how far away they are.
That's how
Is
far
that
away.
even with subspace?
I seem to remember. I couldn't remember. I think it was I seem to remember. I couldn't remember. I think it was. It was either an episode of Discovery or Strange New Worlds where they were near some message beacon, and like they were going far away from the message beacon, and that was like going to take a week to send a message back home.
Yeah, that comes up in some variation of that. on
But
Star
I guess
Trek
that was.
a
But
lot.
when did they get subspace? I don't even remember.
No, they got subspace the whole time.
So like subspace.
Pretty much.
So they must have been really fucking far away if the subspace.
That's
was,
the idea. That's the idea. Early TNG was still mimicking TOS in the sense that they were far away from everything, and as TNG kind of went on, it settled more into we're just traipsing around all the stuff we know. We're dealing with all the people we know.
We knew.
Let's go to Ryza.
All right, I can't do a Jiminy Glick impersonation worth a damn, so I recommend we. I don't even know.
That's pretty good.
We'll practice that. We'll practice
Close enough.
We'll practice that, and we'll come
He
back.
gave my
next
colon
week.
a rim shot.
What's the end bits? Okay, so that was Star Trek. That was the battle.
That was the battle of the Star Trek, baby. Yeah, that was the battle of the Star Trek, baby.
Next
yeah.
week.
We just let him do that
To
a
be
bit. And
announced.
gets out of his system.
That was the battle of the Star Trek, and it's the Star Trek, Captain Picard and Commander Riker. Yeah.
All right, so we didn't mention it earlier in the episode, but we selected the battle. We didn't select it. The
battle.
algorithm. The algorithm selected it. Dan's proprietary algorithm.
We selected it from a list of.
Well, yes, the algorithm produces a list, and then we can look at the list and take the episode off.
The algorithm is a bit flawed, so we have to take
Yeah,
some
well,
liberties.
we can't take when the algorithm consistently suggests episodes that we've done
We still
previously.
exercised a bit of free will.
We're not going to do those episodes again. But anyway, all that is to say, that's how we picked the battle this week. And next week, the algorithm will again tell us what we should watch once it ingests this
Past
episode.
tense.
Once this
Ingests.
episode is concluded, we'll put it in the algorithm. And so you have to follow us on social media in order to determine what to watch next week. That is at least
Social.
until February 16th when Picard comes back. So season 3 of Picard, I believe, starts on February 16th. And so the
So we'll have a few
following Monday.
wacky weeks of old Star Trek.
Yeah, the following Monday we will be discussing Picard, and we'll have our weekly coverage of Picard after that. But up until then, the algorithm will be picking the show. I do not know which series we'll pick. We'll determine that later. But it'll be a good one.
Yeah.
I think
It just won't be TNG.
I think Crusher, one of the reasons Picard likes Crusher so much is because they have a history, obviously, but she's like and she said in this episode, she's the only one that can tell Picard what to do.
And he likes that.
He likes
the
that.
kink. Kink's there's nothing wrong with having a kink.
He's French.
Right? You're being very non-committal, Dan.
Did you notice when he said the star date, he said it all like 42723.9.
Yes, I did notice that. All right. So now we told them to go to our social media, but we did not tell the audience where our social media is.
It's in Newark. It's in Newark, New Jersey.
It's It's Got Star Trek. It's pretty much everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We check it all out there. Oh, Mastodon. We're on Mastodon too. It's Got Star Trek. So
I'm going to Mastodon you.
follow us wherever you are. Subscribe to us in your favorite podcast player, whether that be Apple iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, whatever. Podcast Addict.
Podcast.
Overcast, whatever you're into, we're cool with it. Just subscribe to it. And if you could, give us a little rating and a nice review. It'd be awesome. If we get enough nice reviews and nice ratings, we'll have Dan do some special entertaining stuff.
He's going to do a dance for
He'll do a solo podcast. And he'll put it all together.
Sing us a song.
And we'll all enjoy listening it together. So please leave us some positive reviews so that you can get to enjoy a bonus episode in which Dan is providing a free sample of what you might expect from his 3 to 4 hour special bonus podcast.
It's 20 minutes of
All right. We will talk to you around this time again next week. Bye-bye.
You're welcome, ladies. Adults.